This is Rainy Night Horrors. Outside, the storm brews, and with it comes something darker. Every drop masks a sound, every shadow holds a shape. You're not imagining it. You're hearing the truth. Listen closely. It's already here. This solitude wears teeth. The thought circles, a vulture in the echoing cavern of my skull as I crouch within the caretaker's shack. Outside, movement, a scuffling, dragging sound that belongs to no natural creature of these woods. It wants this flimsy door to yield. Regret is a cold comfort now. This posting, this cursed tenure, a folly born of desperation. Weeks ago, adrift in a sea of overdue notices, my city existence threadbare, the classified felt like sanctuary. Custodian sought, Raven's Roost Lodge, winter tenure. Self-sufficiency, tolerance for profound isolation, essential. Stipend generous, lodging provided. Escape, solitude. The novel, gathering dust. A disembodied baritone on the line, curt, uninterested in credentials, beyond my ability to thaw a pipe or wrangle a generator. Place is shuttered till spring, he'd rasped. Keep the bones of it from freezing, log the damages. Nearer settlements a hard day's hike. You'll be well and truly alone. That's it right with you. Alone. The words sang then, a siren song. How utterly blind I was. The first turn of the moon passed in deceptive tranquility. Raven's Roost Lodge, a timber and stone behemoth, perched among granite shoulders, commanded vistas that stole the breath. Ancient pines clawed at the sky. My obligations were laughably few. Trace the plumbing's pulse, appease the generator's growl, chronicle the slow decay for spring's resurrection. Days bled into exploration across snow-hushed grounds, hours lost before the great hearth's flickering embrace, pages turning, even the neglected manuscript stirring to life. Nights were symphonies of wind sighs through evergreen needles, the punctuation of an owl's query. Then the quiet began to curdle. Minutia at first, a misplaced book, indentations in the snowdrift near my door, not mine, vanishing by noon. A thesaurus from an empty guest wing, like static cling on the edge of hearing, dissolving upon investigation. Imagination, I insisted. Cabin fever's subtle toxin. Maintain the routine. But the anomalies metastasized. Dawn revealed the grand hall's furnishings, violently reconfigured. A silent, chaotic tableau. Another afternoon, returning from rounds, I found every tap in my shack gushing scalding water, steam blinding, the floor a treacherous pool. And the nights became cacophony, scrabbling, insistent within the walls, heavy treads pacing the roof overhead. Once, a sound ripped through the dark, so undeniably a shriek of agony that I lay entombed in blankets till dawn, heart hammering against ribs. The landline, predictably, was dead. My mobile, a useless brick since arrival. The isolation, once coveted, now felt absolute, a tightening noose. It was then, amidst a frantic search for anything, that I unearthed the ledger. Tucked beneath a false floor in the nightstand drawer, ink spidery, frantic. They exist, the first legible sentence screamed. The old tales, the warnings whispered by the fire, all hideously true, the things that dwell beyond the tree line, the voices on the wind. Their hunger is ancient, their fury boundless. Sweet mercy, I believe they desire entry. Page after page chronicled escalating dread, silhouettes that danced against the prevailing wind, visages glimpsed at pains only to evaporate, the unshakable conviction of being perpetually observed. The final entry, a frozen shard of terror. I cannot endure another night. They grow audacious. Last dark, the door almost gave. Dawn is my only hope for escape. Reader, if these words find you, flee. Flee while the path is still clear, before their patience frays. Fool, I should have heeded the scroll desperation, gathered my meager possessions, and plunged into the snows. Consequences be damned. Yet some mulish pride, some desperate need for rational explanation, a cruel jest by my predecessor, anchored me here. A catastrophic miscalculation. Twilight bled into true dark, engaged in the ritual of the evening checklist within the main lodge. The lights stuttered, gasped, died. The generator. But no, inspection revealed its belly full. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It vibrated, low and guttural, a resonance felt in the bones, emanating from the very air around me. Panic, cold and sharp, seized my lungs. I sprinted, flashlight beams slashing wildly through the oppressive dark, back towards the frail sanctuary of the shack. The heavy door slammed shut scant moments before the first blow landed. A tremendous impact rocked the small structure, the doorframe groaning in protest. Wood fibers shrieked. Then came the scraping, like talons dragged across timber, and the voices. Merciful heavens, the voices. At first, insidious whispers coiling through the cracks, weaving around my own ragged gasps. They swelled, a multitude, a chorus of the damned, murmuring my name, Silas, Silas, pleading for admittance. I clamped hands over ears, a futile gesture. Trapped, the forest, a black maw promising only a different demise. Hours crawl, measured in the ebb and flow of the assault, periods of frantic scrabbling, fingernails or worse on wood and glass, alternate with concussive blows that threaten to buckle the walls. Always, the voices. The tenor has shifted, the pleading curdled into seduction, honeyed lies promising dominion, riches, desires. I barely acknowledged myself, yet beneath the silken offers pulses a raw, gnawing avarice. They don't offer gifts. They hunger for consumption. I retreated to the bedroom, wedged a flimsy chair beneath the knob. My arsenal, a cast iron poker, a carving knife, a canister of bare deterrent discovered in some forgotten closet corner. Pathetic talismans against the fury outside. Through the besieged outer door, I hear them now, not just mindless rage, but consultation. A low, sibilant exchange, plotting. Their patience wears thin. Soon, the pretense will drop. They will simply unmake this shelter to reach the prize within. Will these words survive? Will I see another dawn? Unlikely. Let this stand, then, as testament and caution. This solitude wears teeth. The murmurs among the pines are not wind, they are appetite. If this finds your hand, turn back. Now. Do not repeat my error, born of pride and desperation. When the darkness deepens here, when the silence begins to breathe, flee. They are coming, as they come now for me. The bedroom door splinters. A crack appears. Not long now. To whoever follows, forgive my failure. I couldn't hold them back, couldn't sound the alarm sooner. Be wiser, be wary, and above all, when the mountain whispers your name, do not answer, Because if you do, his arrival was unremarkable, just another ripple in the suburban pond. The man across the street, Arthur Vance, unpacking boxes into the vacant house. A fleeting observation, nothing more. Yet, as days bled into weeks, an unsettling resonance began to attach itself to his presence, a persistent dissonance beneath the quiet hum of the neighborhood. It began subtly, insidious intrusions disguised as neighborly interest. He materialized at the periphery, a constant gardener whose watering coincided uncannily with my departures for work. His knowledge of my rhythms felt unnervingly precise. Casual remarks about my early return one afternoon, inquiries about the Saturday morning trail I favored for my runs, details I couldn't recall ever sharing. Initially, I chalked it up to benign curiosity, perhaps the solitude of a newcomer. He lived alone after all, a solitary figure amidst the paired houses. Then the offerings commenced. A Tuesday morning yielded the first, a small, elegantly wrapped box resting on my welcome mat. Inside lay a filament of silver, a delicate bracelet, cold and expensive against my palm. The accompanying card offered only cryptic simplicity. For Alara, from a friend. Confusion bloomed. No birthday, no occasion, no conceivable sender for such an extravagance. When I recounted it to Maya, my closest confidant, she jested about a secret admirer. "Perhaps it's your new neighbor," she teased, referencing my earlier comments about his watchful presence. I dismissed it with a laugh, yet her words lingered, a seed of unease planted. Could it be Arthur? And why? Our interactions had been confined to polite nods and superficial greetings. The gifts persisted, each more unnervingly specific than the last. A profusion of deep purple irises arrived. My secret preference, whispered once over a crackling phone line to Maya. Then, a leather-bound first edition of a novel I'd mentioned longing for during that same private call. Each token bore the identical anonymous signature, "For Ilara, from a friend." The initial bafflement curdled into anxiety. This wasn't flattery. It felt like surveillance. Other incongruities surfaced. A flicker behind his window pane whenever I passed, a shadow synchronizing with my own. His sedan, a dark sentinel parked streets away upon my return from work, only gliding into its designated space moments after my key turned in the lock. One night, a sound snapped me from sleep. A furtive scraping against my bedroom window. Heart hammering against my ribs, I risked a peek through the blinds. A silhouette detached itself from the rhododendrons, melting back into the ink-dark yard. I dialed the police, my voice thin with adrenaline, but the intervening minutes swallowed the intruder. By the time flashing lights painted the street blue, the yard was empty. The officer's pen scratched dutifully across his notepad, his gaze politely unconvinced. "Are you certain it wasn't a dream, Mom? This area is usually very quiet." My insistence felt futile against his professional skepticism. As he prepared to leave, Arthur emerged from his own front door, radiating concern. "Everything all right, Alara?" he called across the lawn. I heard the sirens. A smile felt like a mask. I struggled to hold in place. Thought I saw something. Must have been mistaken. Arthur nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on mine with unnerving intensity. "Well, remember I'm right here if you ever need anything, day or night." His words, ostensibly comforting, landed like stones, the undertone less helpful. Neighbor, more veiled possessor. A chill traced my spine. The following day saw the installation of a comprehensive security system, cameras guarding every portal, motion detectors standing silent sentinel. A fragile layer of security settled over me, yet the sensation of being observed remained, a phantom pressure on my skin. A week crawled by. I returned home one evening to find my front door not quite latched, pushed open a mere fraction. My pulse leapt. I retreated, calling the police from the perceived safety of the curb. This time, they were thorough. The house sweep revealed nothing stolen, nothing overtly disturbed, save for one jarring displacement. A framed photograph of me, usually residing beside my bed, now stood starkly on the kitchen counter. The officer suggested I might have moved it absently, a lapse in memory. But I knew. Someone, he, had breached my sanctuary, handled my possessions, breathed my air. Sleep became an elusive quarry that night. Instead, I sat hunched before the monitor, spooling through hours of monochrome security footage. Emptiness, static. Then, the timestamp clicked past 2:17 a.m., and the grainy screen delivered its verdict. My blood turned to ice. Arthur Vance's unmistakable stride carried him to my front door. He produced what glinted like a key, my key, and let himself in. Nausea clawed at my throat. How long? How had he obtained a key? Horror held me captive as I watched him navigate my home with the chilling familiarity of repeated trespass. Morning found me at the police station, the damning footage clutched in my hand. They recorded my statement, assured me of an investigation, but tempered expectations with warnings of procedural delays. They advised staying elsewhere. My call to Maya was fractured by tremors. She didn't hesitate, demanding I come immediately. While stuffing essentials into a bag, my gaze kept darting towards the window, anticipating Arthur's watchful presence. His house remained inscrutable, curtains drawn like closed eyelids. As my hand reached for the doorknob, a sharp rap echoed through the house. My heart seized. Through the peephole's distorting lens, Arthur stood, his face a mask of solicitous concern. "Elara, are you all right? I saw the suitcase." Silence was my only shield. I held my breath, immobile. An eternity seemed to pass before his footsteps receded. Then, the whisper of paper sliding beneath the door. With hands that shook uncontrollably, I retrieved the envelope. Inside, a photograph. Me, asleep in my own bed. The reverse bore the now dreaded script. For Elara, from a friend. I fled, seeking refuge within Maya's walls, terror and fury warring within me. The audacity, the violation. How long had this hidden intrusion persisted? Police patrols increased, a visible but ultimately superficial deterrent. Arthur, when questioned, performed innocence flawlessly. "I simply don't understand," he'd relayed to the detectives, his voice laced with bewildered sincerity. "Elara and I are friends. I was merely trying to be neighborly. If I've somehow upset her, I only wish she would communicate that to me." It was maddening, knowing the truth, yet being unable to make it stick. The footage, while damning to me, became ambiguous in his telling. He claimed I'd given him a key for emergencies. Without corroboration, it devolved into his word against mine. My existence fractured. Home became inaccessible, work impossible, sleep a landscape of nightmares. Every phone chime, every notification spiked my anxiety, anticipating his digital reach. Then, one night, the pattern broke. Maya's urgent shaking pulled me from a shallow doze, her face stark white in the gloom. "Alara, wake up! Someone's at the door, trying the lock." Adrenaline surged, hot and immediate. We heard it clearly, the metallic scrape and fumble at the front door lock. Maya reached for her phone, poised to dial 911, but a sudden, desperate clarity seized me. "Wait," I whispered, my voice tight. "I have an idea. Reckless, perhaps dangerously naive. But the exhaustion of fear, the chafing yoke of his control, demanded defiance. It was time to invert the power dynamic." We extinguished the lights, melting into the deepest shadows of Maya's living room. Seconds later, the soft click of the front door opening, then closing. Footsteps, hesitant yet chillingly familiar, padded across the floorboards. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs, loud enough, I feared, to betray us. I clenched my fists, forcing stillness, adhering to the desperate strategy. The bedroom door swung inward on silent hinges. A flashlight beam sliced through the darkness, playing over the empty indentation on the bed where I should have been. A sharp, indrawn breath, hurried steps towards the vacant space. That was our cue. Maya slammed the light switch as I burst from concealment, pepper spray aimed. Arthur spun, his eyes widening, not just with shock, but with something far more disturbing, a flicker of manic, possessive triumph that turned my blood cold. "Alara," he breathed, a slow, unnerving smile spreading across his features. "I knew you'd come around. I knew you felt it too." "The only thing I feel is revulsion," I spat, my thumb pressing the trigger. "You're sick, Arthur. You need help." His expression hardened instantly. "You don't mean that. We belong together. I've watched over you, kept you safe. Everything I did for you." He lunged forward. Instinct took over. The caustic spray hit him squarely in the face. A strangled howl tore from his throat as he clawed blindly at his eyes. Maya was already relaying our location to the dispatcher. Within moments, the rising wail of sirens pierced the night. Arthur collapsed and writhing on the floor, dissolved into racking sobs. "I just wanted you to love me," he wept. "Why couldn't you just love me?" When the police stormed in, guns drawn, a profound wave of relief washed through me, scouring away the accumulated dread. It was finished, truly, irrevocably finished. The ensuing weeks dissolved into a montage of police statements, legal proceedings, court dates. Arthur faced a battery of charges: stalking, breaking and entering, harassment. The evidence secured that night corroborated by items discovered during a search of his house, proved insurmountable. Slowly, painstakingly, I began the work of reclaiming my fractured life. Returning to my house was the hardest step. Changing the locks and upgrading the security felt like mere gestures against the psychological violation. Therapy became a necessary anchor. Months unfurled. One tranquil summer evening, perched on my front porch, watching the sky ignite in hues of orange and rose, a realization dawned. For the first time in what felt like an age, I wasn't scanning the periphery. I wasn't flinching at sudden noises. I was simply present, breathing the warm air. The scars Arthur inflicted would remain, etched onto my psyche. I moved through the world with a newfound caution, aware of the darkness that could lurk behind a seemingly friendly facade. But fear no longer held dominion. I had endured. I had emerged, not unscathed, but stronger, free. As the final sliver of sun dipped below the horizon, a quiet smile touched my lips. Arthur had sought to own me, to script my life according to his obsession, but ultimately, my existence, myself, belonged only to me, and that was an inviolable truth, something no one could ever steal. My twilight jogs, I once believed, were sanctuaries carved from the day's clamor. Never did I imagine they'd curdle into a source of gnawing disquiet. Post-work, my customary path describes a lazy loop around the neighborhood, skirting the skeletal remains of the old Loomis mill. Long defunct, it broods in silence behind a perimeter of rusted mesh fence, punctuated by faded warnings and vacant glassless eyes. Darkness congregates there, absolute and profound. The few municipal lamps stutter or stand entirely extinguished along that stretch, swallowing visibility beyond a few paces. Yet, this very obscurity was its allure. Fewer souls, scant traffic, and uninterrupted space to unravel the knots tied tight by hours spent indoors. That particular segment, once the run's quiet heart, soured weeks ago. One evening, equilibrium faltered, a novel sensation, sharp and unwelcome, the feeling of accompaniment. I pounded the pavement, calibrating my breath, seeking rhythm. My footfalls drummed a lonely tattoo against the asphalt. Ordinarily, this, mingled with the sighing wind, composed the night's sparse symphony. But that night, a dissonant echo threaded through it, the phantom cadence of other steps, faint, ephemeral, perhaps a trick of acoustics or weary nerves. Still, it raised the fine hairs along my arms. Initially, dismissal felt easy. An echo, I reasoned, or the distant thrum of an engine blocks away. But the conviction of being observed intensified, a palpable weight settling between my shoulder blades. My jaw locked, my stomach felt dense, impacted, as if I'd swallowed riverstones. Abruptly, I halted, pivoted. My gaze swept the desolate street. Emptiness greeted me. A lone streetlight pulsed erratically. The mill's fence retained its familiar dereliction, oxidized chain link crowned with barbs. No flicker of movement disturbed the deep shadows pooling near its base. My heart hammered an irregular beat against my ribs, my breath catching. After a suspended moment, a self-conscious chuckle escaped me. I shook my head, banishing the unease, and resumed my pace. The remainder of the run passed without incident. Home, showered and fed, I chided myself for the foolishness. A couple of evenings later, the same route beckoned. As I neared the Loomis mill once more, the feeling of unseen eyes returned, this time amplified, visceral. My pulse leapt the instant I turned onto the lane, flanking the edifice. Here, the sidewalk fractured, littered with urban detritus. Again, beneath the slap of my own trainers, I perceived it, that spectral footfall, trailing mine, ceasing precisely when I slackened my stride. Several times I spun around. Each instance revealed only stillness, the quietude profound. A constriction tightened my throat. A chill, unrelated to the ambient air, traced my spine. My palms grew slick. I wiped them on my shorts, accelerating, desperate to put that length of road behind me. The following day, the mill colonized my thoughts. Its image superimposed itself onto spreadsheets. Its silence echoed during mundane tasks. Was I merely stoking my own anxieties, or did a genuine anomaly lurk there? That evening, determined to conquer the burgeoning paranoia, I ran again. Same circuit. The instant my feet hit that particular block, however, the familiar dread descended. The factory loomed starboard, colossal windows, mostly shattered or crudely bordered, cryptic graffiti scarring its brick skin, no glimmer of light within. I pressed onward, pace quickened, eyes darting, scanning the periphery. The oppressive weight bore down. My legs felt leaden, my breaths shallow, rapid. Involuntary glances flickered over my shoulder. Still nothing. No one. After several more nights steeped in this escalating tension, the paranoia grew tiresome. I resolved to inspect the property more closely. Hoisting myself onto a low concrete block beside the fence, I sought a vantage point over the enclosed yard. I anticipated the usual tableau of industrial decay, splintered pallets, perhaps the corroded husks of machinery. Instead, my eyes caught a sudden burst of light from within the main structure, brief, sharp, like the flick of a torch or a small lantern. My chest seized. There existed no logical reason for occupancy at this hour. The place was legendarily deserted. My pulse roared in my ears. "Hey!" The shout tore from me, pure reflex, devoid of strategy, fueled by an adrenaline surge demanding acknowledgement. Instantly, the light winked out. Silence crashed back in, thick and absolute. No shuffle of feet, no groan of hinges. My skin prickled. My heart thrashed against my sternum. I realized my knuckles were white, gripping the fence top with bruising force. A minute stretched, taut as wire. Then I dropped back to the pavement, standing uncertainly. Eventually, I retreated, resuming my run, mind ablaze. Whoever was inside had surely heard me. Their silence felt deliberate, unnerving. The next day, I sought out Silas, a security guard stationed near an office building a block away. He often patrolled outdoors in the evenings. Casually, I inquired if he had noticed any activity around the old Loomis mill. He regarded me with mild confusion. That place, he asserted, had been sealed tight for years. No power, no personnel, nothing. He recounted early troubles with trespassers, a decade past, but insisted the owner had since secured it thoroughly with boards and locks. Now, apparently, it attracted no interest. Quiet as a tomb, far as I know, he shrugged, suggesting perhaps vagrants found ways in, though he personally hadn't witnessed anything untoward. I thanked him, departing with a sense of unease heavier than before. The mill did not feel quiet to me. That evening, I paused at the street's entrance, contemplating the structure from afar. Around 9, the air cooler now. The broken panes on the second floor caught slivers of moonlight, returning a dead gleam. I waited, watching intently for several minutes. Stillness reigned. No interior lights flickered. My stomach remained clenched. Reluctance warred with compulsion. I forced myself forward. The run began ordinarily enough. My shoes crunched gravel. A feral cat darted across my path. The building towered beside me, monolithic, mute. Then, the presence returned, an almost physical pressure, the certainty of eyes fixed on my retreating form. I stopped, turned. Nothing but the dimly illuminated street stretched behind me. My exhale shuddered. A peculiar tingling suffused my arms, a primal readiness for fight or flight. I lingered, scrutinizing every shadow, every recess. Then, faster than intended, I continued. The mill's image seared onto my thoughts. A few nights later, the need for clarity became overwhelming. Not to breach the building itself, but to scrutinize the yard again, perhaps find a revealing aperture. I came prepared. A compact flashlight, darker attire, a conscious effort to muffle my steps. Approaching the fence near 10 o'clock, the area lay shrouded in darkness, seemingly deserted. I scouted the perimeter, searching for weakness, a point of ingress. Near the base, I discovered a section where the chain link appeared deliberately cut or forced open. Crouching low, I slipped through the gap, hyper-aware, scanning the gloom. The yard exhaled dust and damp earth, discarded crates, rusted iron rods, and tenacious weeds navigating cracked pavement littered the space. Wind rustled through stacked plastic sheeting, creating a faint, papery rattle. I advanced cautiously, beam sweeping, hunting for fresh footprints or tire tracks. None were apparent. My mouth felt arid. Swallowing brought no relief to the tightness in my throat. Closer to the main building, I found the primary doors barricaded with stout planks. A smaller side door, near what might have been a loading bay, was secured with a heavy chain and padlock. Impasse. Through a fissure between boards, I peered into absolute blackness. A stale miasma drifted out. Old wood, maybe mold. "Hello?" I whispered, the query absurd even as I voiced it. "Anyone here?" My own voice seemed amplified in the void. Only silence answered. My heart hammered as I circled the building's flank, seeking another entrance, perhaps a ground-level window compromised. Near a corner, I found one, small, glass shattered, just large enough. Angling my light inside, the beam illuminated a room cluttered with shrouded shelves and archaic equipment. Dust motes danced in the artificial light. My hand trembled slightly. My imagination conjured figures stepping silently into the beam's path. Holding my breath, I listened. At first, only the frantic thrumming in my ears registered. Then, a faint scraping noise emanated from deeper within the factory's bowels, soft, intermittent, like something heavy being dragged laboriously across a rough surface. Its precise origin remained elusive, but the sound sent a jolt through my system. Every nerve ending screamed alert. Cold sweat beaded on my forehead. Frozen, I swept the light frantically through the gap, seeking motion, but the beam revealed only the same static tableau of dust and shadow. A wave of raw fear washed over me. I envisioned someone lurking just beyond the light's reach, observing me. Calling the police felt premature. What concrete evidence did I possess beyond unsettling sounds and my own trespass? My pulse galloped, a frantic drum against my eardrums. Forcing myself back from the window, I scanned the yard one last time. Still nothing. No footsteps, no lights. Yet the factory felt charged, occupied, as if someone or something waited within. Retreat was the only sane option. My limbs felt unsteady, my mind churning through terrifying possibilities. Crouching again, I slipped back through the fence opening, heart still racing. I melted into the shadows, hastening away from the property, acutely aware of my visibility. Upon reaching the main street, I broke into a full run, not stopping until I reached home, casting frequent glances over my shoulder, feeling utterly exposed. Over the subsequent week, I deliberately avoided the Loomis Mill, opting for a longer, brighter circuit through busier parts of town. Yet, each night, safely home, my thoughts would invariably drift back to that brooding structure. Was the light visible again? Was someone inside, engaged in unknown purposes? Ultimately, curiosity, that persistent itch, proved stronger than fear. I returned to my original route, choosing an earlier hour, around 8. Perhaps twilight would offer some buffer against the dread. The street was deserted as ever, but not yet fully claimed by night. I ran slowly, cautiously, eyes fixed on the building. No lights shone within, no movement stirred in the yard. The familiar thoracic tension, however, gripped me tightly. Halfway down the block, a sharp clang shattered the quiet, metal striking concrete, originating from behind the factory fence. I stopped dead, adrenaline surging anew. Every instinct urged flight, yet something compelled me towards the fence one last time. Peering through the mesh, the yard lay bathed in the day's fading embers. Near the side door, the one I'd found chained, a silhouette materialized, hunched low, unmistakably human. My heart leaped. As I drew breath to call out, the figure moved, slipping swiftly through that very side door. It hadn't been secured after all. The form vanished inside. The yard was instantly still again. My mind struggled to reconcile what I'd witnessed. A person, definitely. Not an animal, not a trick of light. Nausea churned low in my gut. Sweat trickled down my nape. Rooted to the spot, I eventually forced myself to back away, unwilling to attract attention, unwilling to confront the unknown occupant. I resumed running, legs heavy as stone, glancing back repeatedly until the Loomis Mill receded from view. That was my final foray into investigation. I surrendered. A safer route became my norm, yet nightly the impulse persists, to deviate, to pass by, to see if the mystery unfolds further. The memory of the light, the silhouette, the disquieting sounds remains vivid. Something resides there, something clandestine. Unmasking it isn't my burden, I tell myself. I haven't alerted the authorities. A sliver of guilt lingers for this inaction, yet it's overshadowed by the visceral dread the place evokes. So now, my runs follow different paths. Paths alive with traffic, people, illuminated corners. The occasional prickle of unease still surfaces, a phantom echo of being watched, but it lacks the suffocating intensity of that lonely stretch beside the Loomis Mill. Forgetting what I encountered feels impossible, even without resolution. Should anyone else feel drawn to explore, I hope they possess nerves stronger than mine. That place is locked down for a reason, perhaps. Or perhaps it's merely derelict, co-opted by someone with secrets to keep. Regardless, I am finished. My evening runs are meant for mental clarity, a state unattainable while shadowed by the enigma of that abandoned building. Sometimes driving past in daylight, I see the mill. Under the sun's impartial gaze, it appears merely dilapidated, a weary structure of broken glass and boarded entries. But night transforms it, imbues it with secrets, and I know with unshakable certainty there is more there than meets the eye. For now, I leave it undisturbed. No proof exists of anything sinister or spectral, only the insistent clamor of my own intuition warning me away. And that warning, finally, I heed. Yesterday began with fire tracing lines along my left forearm. Not heat, precisely, but an insistent burn beneath the skin where peculiar lacerations had appeared, thin crimson furrows, stark against the pale flesh, mimicking claw marks. I record no impact, no stumble against furniture. This house held no creature that might inflict such wounds. Standing before the bathroom mirror, a stranger scrutinizing his own reflection, I probed the mystery of the injury. Then, a coldness, sharp and sudden, prickled the nape of my neck, spilling like icy water across my shoulders. Concurrent with the chill came a sound from below, a faint, dry skrr, metal complaining against rough concrete. My pulse stuttered. The chain, the one coiled in the cellar's gloom. This relic of a house, acquired only months prior, possessed a basement steeped in the odor of damp earth and decay. Its floor, uneven cement, its walls, fractured maps weeping moisture. During my first descent into that subterranean space, my gaze snagged on it. A formidable chain depending from an iron hook embedded in the ceiling timbers. Rusted, its thick links formed a heavy loop, ending abruptly, tethered to nothing but the hook itself. An anomaly, likely forgotten detritus from occupants long departed. I'd contemplated removing it, yet feared the aged hook might surrender, bringing down plaster, or worse. So, I'd left its inert weight undisturbed. Nights soon acquired a subtle soundtrack, odd creaks and groans, initially dismissed as the settling groans of old timbers or the wind's fingers probing the eaves. But one evening, summoned to the cellar by a tripped breaker, I could have sworn I witnessed the chain perform a slow, pendulum arc. No draft stirred the stale air. The cellar windows were sealed tight. It was a deliberate sway, a languid back and forth, as if nudged by an unseen hand. Imagination, I insisted. Vibrations from my own tread on the floorboards above. Still, a knot of unease tightened in my gut as I retreated upstairs. Weeks dissolved into the routine of work and hesitant attempts at domesticity, patching plaster, hanging pictures, striving to impose order on the old structure. Yet, the chain lingered at the periphery of my thoughts. Sometimes, wrenched from sleep, in the dead hours, I'd strain my ears against the silence, catching a whisper of sound from below. A faint clink, a brief scrape, then stillness, allowing me to rationalize it away. until the marks began. First, a delicate score across my back, dismissed as an oddity. Then another, etched onto my calf. Fine lines, like scratches from impossibly sharp fingernails. I inspected my mattress for errant springs, the bed frame for jagged edges. Found nothing. Sleep became a shallow, guarded state. Involuntarily, my mind circled back to the cellar, to the chain, though logic screamed against any connection. How could inert metal below inflict wounds upon my sleeping form above? Driven by a gnawing disquiet, I resolved on a closer examination one evening after supper. Armed with a heavy torch and a small geologist's hammer, I descended. Standing before the rusted sentinel, I bathed each link in the torch's beam. Flakes of oxidation drifted silently to the cement floor. The links were brutally thick, perhaps 20 in number. Tapping them with the hammer produced a resonant clang that reverberated harshly in the confined space, amplifying my own ragged nerves. A pressure built in my chest, the premonition of unwelcome discovery. Yet, inspection revealed nothing beyond aged, pitted iron. I grasped the chain, attempting to wrench it free from its mooring. It held fast. The hook was deeply anchored. Testing the ceiling beam elicited a low groan, but no yield. Defeated, I let the chain fall slack. As I turned towards the stairs, a soft tink-tink sounded behind me, like a fingernail flicked against metal. I froze, whipping the torch beam back. The chain oscillated gently, pendulously. No cause was apparent. My heart hammered against my ribs. My mouth turned to dust. I scrambled up the stairs, slammed the cellar door, and twisted the deadbolt home. That night, behind my securely closed bedroom door, sleep was a fraught territory. Every creak of the house, tightening the tension in my chest, conjuring images of hanging iron. Morning light revealed fresh abrasions striping my right shoulder. Not deep, but stinging. A frantic survey of the room, windows latched, sheets smooth, closets empty, yielded no explanation. No attic access here. All doors remained locked. Drawing a ragged breath, I fought for composure. Stress, I told myself. Exhaustion playing tricks. The solution? Avoidance. Stay away from the cellar. Ignore the chain, and perhaps normalcy would reassert itself. Days bled together under this new regime of denial. I never ventured downstairs. Yet, the nocturnal sounds persisted. The dry scraping, the intermittent clinking, sometimes seeming to emanate directly beneath my feet. An insidious image took root. The chain, unhooked, slithering across the cellar floor, link by agonizing link. I recoiled from the thought, too absurd, too exhausting to entertain. My work suffered. Colleagues remarked on the deepening shadows beneath my eyes. I fabricated excuses. Phantom contractors, urgent household repairs, to escape the office early. Then came the night the sound became undeniable. A loud, grating drag of metal ripped through the quiet. My eyes flew open. I lay utterly still, breath trapped in my lungs. The noise continued, a slow, deliberate shk, punctuated by the heavier clatter of shifting links. It seemed to be moving along the floorboards outside my room. My heart threatened to batter its way through my ribs. Pushing myself upright, I fumbled for the bedside lamp. Click. Light flooded the small space. My bedroom door was shut as I'd left it. My phone lay on the nightstand. But who would I call? The police? To report a perambulating chain? insanity. Summoning a fragile courage, I eased open the bedroom door. The hallway beyond lay in darkness. My fingers found the switch, flicked it. Light flared, illuminating the corridor. My breath hitched. There, stretched taut along the polished floorboards, was the chain. It snaked from the top of the cellar stairs, extending halfway towards my bedroom door. A faint trail of rust dust marked its path. My knees turned to water. I clung to the door frame for support. As I watched, paralyzed, the entire length of the chain slid backward several inches with a sickening scrape. I flinched violently, nearly stumbling. An unnatural cold permeated the hallway air, raising goose flesh along my arms. My first instinct, seize it, hurl it out into the night, banish it, but my feet were leaden anchors. I could only stare, mind vacant with shock. Slowly, deliberately, I forced myself forward, hands outstretched tentatively, as if placating some feral beast. My fingers trembled. My breathing grew shallow. Reaching it, I bent down. The links were frigid, their rough texture abrasive against my palm, leaving smears of reddish-brown rust. I tried to drag it towards the front door, but it felt impossibly heavy, a dead, stubborn weight. I managed a few feet before it seemed to jerk in my grasp. A sudden, violent spasm. I dropped it, scrambling backward, swallowing against the frantic pounding in my chest. This defied all reason. A desperate urge arose. Lock it back in the cellar. Yet the thought of descending into that darkness, confining myself with this, was repellent. But leaving it coiled in my hallway felt equally untenable. Sucking in a shuddering breath, I gripped the chain once more, hauling it back towards the cellar door. It resisted, catching on unseen obstacles, emitting a high-pitched screech against the wood floor that set my teeth on edge. Each foot gained felt like a victory hard won. Finally, at the stairwell's precipice, I flung it downward. It tumbled end over end, crashing onto the concrete below in a discordant jangle. I slammed the door, ramming the bolt home. The remainder of the night was spent pacing the living room, thoughts racing in frantic circles. Flee? Check into a hotel? It felt like surrender. This was my house now. Toss the chain into the yard. I pictured it crawling back, link by metallic link. Preposterous, yet the memory of its movement was too vivid. Call someone? Who would believe such a tale without proof? My phone displayed 3 a.m. I remained vigilant until dawn painted the windows gray, half expecting the scraping to resume. Silence held. The following day, bolstered by sunlight, I forced myself to confront the cellar again. Crowbar in one hand, torch in the other, legs stiff with residual fear. Opening the door revealed the chain lying in a tangled heap at the foot of the stairs, motionless. I descended cautiously, sweeping the torch beam across the familiar damp walls, the dusty shelves, the inert washing machine. Then, a soft clink. The heap on the floor seemed to settle, adjusting its position fractionally. My heart leaped. I gripped the crowbar tighter, sweat filming my palms, and prodded the metal mass. It merely rattled dully against the cement. Taking deep breaths, I sought logic, removal, complete banishment from the property. I would pry the hook from the ceiling if necessary, but glancing upwards, I saw the hook was already empty. and bent downwards, deformed, as if subjected to immense pulling force. The chain hadn't been merely lying there. It had torn itself free. This discovery sent a fresh wave of disturbance through me. Donning thick work gloves retrieved from a toolbox, I began the arduous task of hauling the chain upstairs, wrapping its length around my forearm, pulling link by heavy link. Each one scraped and groaned against the wooden steps. My muscles burned with the effort. Reaching the front door, I kicked it open, dragged the chain onto the driveway, where it landed with a heavy thud, scattering rust chips like dried blood. Catching my breath, chest tight, temples pounding, I opened my car's boot, hefted the cold, uncooperative weight inside, and slammed the lid shut. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I drove without destination, needing only distance. The frantic rhythm of my heart filled my ears. 10 minutes later, behind a derelict strip mall, I found a row of industrial dumpsters. Parking hastily, I retrieved the chain and hurled it into the nearest bin. It landed with a final satisfying clang. I stared into the dumpster's shadowed interior, half expecting movement. Nothing. A wave of profound relief washed over me, though an undercurrent of dread persisted. I drove home, forcing calm upon myself. That night brought genuine sleep. No scraping, no clinking. My shoulders eased their vigilant tension. Morning inspection revealed no new marks upon my skin. The weight felt truly lifted. I prepared for work, ate breakfast without the familiar nausea, and left the house feeling cautiously optimistic. Returning that evening, my first act was to check the cellar. The bent hook remained, stark against the timber. The space below was silent, empty of menace. A long, slow sigh escaped me. Perhaps, finally, it was over. But near midnight, a rapping began at my front door. Slow, irregular, a tentative, almost questioning sound. My stomach coiled. Creeping towards the entrance, heart pounding a frantic tattoo, I peered through the peephole. The porch was empty. The street beyond, deserted under the sodium lamps. I waited, breath held. The knocking resumed, soft taps against the wood. Then silence. Cautiously, I unlocked and opened the door, switching on the porch light. Nothing. No one. Then my eyes fell upon the walkway leading to the porch steps. Lying there, stark against the pale concrete, was a single, rust-pitted chain link. My blood ran cold. I scanned the empty street again, the shadowed yards. Nothing moved. The link lay inert, yet it felt watchful. I retreated quickly, securing the door, my mind reeling. The familiar tightness constricted my chest, the same sensation I'd felt witnessing the chain's first impossible movement. Disposal hadn't been the solution I desperately hoped for. Now, I sit here in the dim hallway light, phone screen illuminating my face, listening. Every house-settling creak is magnified, every distant car engine a potential harbinger. My limbs are rigid with tension. My skin prickles with phantom sensations. My gaze keeps returning to the cellar door, though reason insists the chain is gone, mostly gone. Calmness is a receding shore. The single link on the sidewalk outside is an undeniable promise or a threat. If that desiccated scraping sound begins anew, I don't know if I possess the fortitude to investigate. It feels inevitable, merely a question of time before that chain, or pieces of it, finds its way back inside. And should that happen, I have no strategy, no defense. Leaving feels like cowardice. Staying feels like madness. I am trapped, suspended in terror, hoping against hope for a reprieve I increasingly doubt will come. That chain, I fear, is far from finished with me. A tremor traced my forearms, the very second my ties bit into the farm's neglected gravel. Out front, a sign hung weary and bleached by seasons past. The parking expanse lay vacant save for my solitary rental. By the main house entrance, a lean figure consulted his watch, propped against a tired wooden post, the initial attendant. At first glance, ordinariness reigned, paint flaking like sunburnt skin, a porch surrendering to gravity, a weather vane snapped jagged against the roofline. Yet, an insistent wrongness hummed beneath the surface. 2 hours I'd driven, lured by whispers of peculiar phenomena. I hadn't banked on finding something that would truly burrow under my skin. I was mistaken. Approaching, I offered a hand. His grip was firm, polite, though his gaze drifted, preoccupied. Tours proceeded, he explained, despite the property's slow surrender in places. Previous inhabitants, he murmured, had weathered profound tribulations. Tribulations? I pressed. A shrug was his primary answer, followed by vague mentions. Sickness, conflagrations, a corrosive stress that ultimately fractured the family bonds. Details I craved, but he deflected, gesturing toward the main house, where the official narrative awaited. Perhaps 10 souls congregated in the entrance hall, beneath walls papered with sepia-toned severity, men and women corseted by convention, their eyes hard, unyielding. We trailed another guide, this one more orator than caretaker, through chambers thick with the ghosts of furniture draped in dust. Velvet ropes barred access, where floorboards whispered warnings of collapse. The quiet struck me, a profound stillness that swallowed our shuffling feet and hushed inquiries. No birdsong filtered through the grimy panes. No breeze stirred the stagnant air. The house felt hermetic, poised to inhale us whole. Our narrator spun tales of blighted harvests claimed by brutal storms, of a barn inferno consuming vital machinery, of whispers concerning crippling debts. Eventually, desertion claimed the land, until distant kin resurrected it, a curated ruin for the curious. A few visitors, he conceded, reported disembodied voices after dark. He spoke of fleeting shadows glimpsed in upper windows long after closing. I fought a dismissive eye roll, standard fare for such places, but halted. His delivery was utterly devoid of theatricality. Grave, measured, he recounted these things not as spectral fictions, but as documented occurrences. We emerged from the heavy air of the house, crossing the intervening yard toward a lesser building nestled behind. A workshop, perhaps, or storage. Corroded implements clung to the walls, some identified by the guide as original artifacts. It was around the time this structure rose, he intimated, that the family's misfortunes began their steep ascent. He alluded to frayed tempers, to nights stolen by anxiety. No deaths were explicitly named, yet his tone painted a picture of spirits crushed under relentless pressure. After this, the small assembly dissolved, individuals drifting across the grounds. I lingered, seeking out the initial attendant again. Were there specific anomalies, I inquired, occurrences reported with unsettling consistency? He paused, a flicker of reluctance crossing his face. There's talk, he admitted, lowering his voice slightly. People sometimes describe a woman walking the property late at night, dressed in white or something pale. They say she looks troubled, nothing I can vouch for personally. When I pushed, he conceded the tale circulated among the staff. Some witnesses claimed to hear her calling out, a searching sound. A ghost of a smile touched his lips, betraying uncertainty about sharing these fragments. Then, murmuring an excuse, he hurried off to rejoin the stragglers. Another hour, I wandered the open acreage, circling the hulking barn, peering into smaller collapsing sheds, skirting the overgrown fields. Late afternoon light thickened into haze. The air grew heavy, cloying, plastering my shirt to my back. Each turn around a blind corner brought a jolt of expectation, a figure standing sentinel, but only the crunch of my own boots on gravel and the dry rustle of leaves along the fence line answered. By the time I'd had my fill, the farm was shuttering its weary eyes, gates groaning shut near 5. Down the road, maybe a mile, I found lodging at a modest inn. Country Rest proclaimed a simple wooden sign beside a short drive. I parked, hefted my overnight bag, and received a room key from a woman at the front desk whose silence felt like a local dialect. My second-floor window overlooked a dense stand of trees, a green curtain separating the inn's plot from an adjacent field. I unpacked, sought out a quick meal at a nearby diner, but the farm lingered. The guide's carefully chosen words replayed. Hardships, stress, voices, shadows. Had the sheer weight of their suffering somehow saturated the soil, imprinted itself onto the very air? Theories about places retaining emotional residue surfaced in my mind, only to be waved away. Tourist traps thrived on such embellished folklore. Darkness had fully descended by my return. Sleep beckoned, promising restoration before a planned revisit to the farm come morning. But sleep, when it came, was shallow. Around midnight, a peculiar disturbance jolted me awake. Nothing specific, just a sense of wrongness. I lay staring at the textured ceiling, the air conditioner's low drone the only sound, until it wasn't. A noise, faint but distinct, like someone murmuring my name. Imagination, I reasoned, or the frayed edge of a dream. It came again. Hey, you there? My heart kicked against my ribs. A sudden clamminess slicked my palms. Sitting bolt upright, I slid towards the window. Outside, the night was absolute, save for the weak yellow splash cast by the inn sign near the drive. Beyond that small circle of visibility, the trees and field were lost in impenetrable black. Pressing my face close to the cool glass, I strained to pierce the gloom. The voice returned, softer now, yet unmistakably directed at me. No one visible. A knot tightened in my stomach. Adrenaline surged, a cold fire licking through my limbs. My hands trembled. My breath came short and fast. Edging the window open a few inches, I felt a cool draft kiss my face. Then a whisper, seemingly closer, yet still sourceless. My eyes caught movement, a flicker of white near the tree line's ragged edge. Not a trick of light, not a reflection. It possessed the distinct shape of a person clad in pale fabric. I froze, caught between calling out and shrinking back. Hello. The word emerged, thin, unsteady. Is someone there? Silence answered, punctuated only by the faint sigh of leaves. Seconds later, movement again. Sharper this time, the figure drifted nearer, partially entering the weak illumination from the inn sign. It resolved into the form of a woman draped in what looked like a long white dress. Her head turned, a slow, searching motion. My pulse hammered, a frantic drum against the sudden dryness in my mouth. I blinked, trying to clear the impossible image, to confirm I wasn't caught in some waking nightmare. She seemed to look towards my window. Her face remained indistinct, a pale oval shadowed by distance and darkness, but her posture radiated anxiety, a desperate tension. Her shoulders were drawn tight. She held herself as if perpetually bracing for a blow or pleading for unseen aid. I remained utterly still, my knuckles bleached white where I gripped the sill. Then she turned away, retreated with unnerving smoothness back into the consuming darkness, and was gone, vanished behind the trees. Utter silence reclaimed the field. I stood anchored to the spot for what felt like an eternity, heart pounding in my ears, waiting for her return. Rational thoughts warred with primal fear. Run outside, check. Could it be a real person in distress? Yet her appearance, too strange, too sudden, too silent. Hesitation won. Finally, propelled by a residual surge of adrenaline, I went downstairs. Retrieving a flashlight from my car, I circled the rear of the inn, gravel crunching loudly underfoot. The throb in my neck kept time with my steps. The trees loomed, their darkness profound. My flashlight beam sliced through the night, illuminating only trunks and tangled undergrowth. No one. Hello? My voice sounded small, quickly absorbed by the night. After several minutes of fruitless searching, defeat settled in. A chill unrelated to the night air crept over my skin. The sensation of being watched prickled at the back of my neck. Retreating to my room, I double-locked the door, sinking onto the edge of the bed, vibrating with residual fear. Sleep was impossible. The disembodied voice echoed in my mind, a persistent, looping fragment. Consciousness finally blurred somewhere around 3, yielding only when morning light forced its way through the curtains, and my phone alarm buzzed insistently. Rest had eluded me. My eyes felt lined with sand, muscles taut with remembered tension. Dressing quickly, I descended the stairs. The innkeeper offered a perfunctory query about my sleep. I managed a nod, the night's events sealed behind my teeth. The drive back to the farm unfolded under a cooler sky. A faint breeze greeted me as I stepped from the car. The same attendant from the previous day spotted me, offering a wave of recognition. We ambled towards the rear of the main house. I didn't prevaricate. Had visitors ever mentioned, I asked directly, seeing a woman in white near the inn or beyond the farm's official boundaries? He met my gaze, held it, then gave a slow, deliberate nod. A few, he confirmed, had spoken of hearing voices or glimpsing a figure in the fields nocturnally. Descriptions converged. A woman, light-colored attire, an air of distress or confusion. Locals sometimes assumed a neighbor wandering, he said, but verification remained elusive. Others chalked it up to suggestion, the power of the farm's narrative. Yet, he added, the consistency across accounts was difficult to dismiss entirely. He hadn't witnessed it himself, but he'd absorbed enough stories to concede something inexplicable was afoot. A strange wave of relief washed over me. I wasn't inventing phantoms. I recounted my experience, the voice that seemed to know my presence, the figure by the trees. He questioned whether I was certain she'd spoken my name. Honesty compelled me to admit uncertainty. It was more a muffled summons, perhaps shaped into familiarity by my half-awake mind. But the visual, the person outside, that, I insisted, was undeniable. He suggested I speak with the groundskeeper, a man who'd worked the property far longer. He led me toward a small shed flanking the barn. An older man, shaded by a wide-brimmed straw hat, was methodically sweeping the threshold. Introductions were made, and haltingly, I shared the story of my night. The groundskeeper listened patiently, his expression unreadable. When I finished, he leaned the broom against the weathered wood. That woman, he stated simply, had been part of the farm's unofficial law for years. He recalled a couple terrified by tapping on their inn window at 2 a.m. Another guest swore they heard footsteps pacing the inn's porch, only to find it empty. Sometimes a white gown, sometimes merely pale clothes. Who she was, he couldn't say, shrugging slightly. Never malevolent by all accounts, just sorrowful, searching. The remainder of the morning I dedicated to walking the farm's perimeter, seeking any mundane explanation. A hidden path to the inn, a neighboring house whose resident favored nocturnal strolls. I found only derelict fences choked by tenacious weeds, a few faint animal trails, no fresh prints, no evidence of regular human passage. Around noon, returning toward the main house, the initial attendant intercepted me. Would I care to see the second floor? Normally restricted, but the owners permitted it occasionally, provided caution was exercised. We ascended a staircase that groaned under our weight. The upstairs corridor was dim, the floorboards yielding slightly beneath my feet. He guided me into a bedroom where antique furniture huddled under dust sheets. The windows offered a view across the very fields stretching behind the property. It was out there, the attendant murmured, that staff sometimes glimpsed a pale figure, typically near dawn or deep in the night. I confessed the visceral tension that had seized me the previous night, the pins and needles sensation crawling up my arms, the sinking dread as I opened the window. He nodded, a quiet understanding in his eyes. I realized then my hand was clamped onto the banister, knuckles stark white, mirroring my grip on the windowsill hours before. We descended back to the ground floor. The tour concluded shortly after, the small group dispersing towards the gift shop near the exit. Stepping back into the sunlight, I watched people chatting beside their cars, a fleeting wonder passing through me. Would any of them see her tonight? A part of me felt compelled to stay, to brave another night at the inn, to see if she would reappear. But the unease lingered, potent and unsettling. I was rattled, sleep-deprived, my head throbbing dully. Just as I reached my car, the groundskeeper in the straw hat caught my eye, beckoning me over. Might not be worth much, he offered, his voice low. But if you happen to see her again, try speaking to her. Some say she fades away if you acknowledge her. Had anyone ever received a reply? I asked. He shook his head slowly. Most froze, he reckoned, or hid. Still, might be worth the attempt. I offered my thanks, slid behind the wheel. A faint tremor persisted in my hands as I turned the ignition. In the rearview mirror, the farm receded, the house paint dull and peeling under the bright sun, the barn listing slightly, the fields behind rippling in the breeze. My mind conjured the woman in white, the slow, searching turn of her head. The tightness returned to my chest. The memory felt disturbingly immediate, undeniably real. I pointed the car towards the highway, the debate about staying another night finally resolving into retreat. One encounter was sufficient. I wasn't certain I could endure a repeat of that nerve-shredding tension. My thoughts kept circling back to her indistinct shape against the blackness, the echo of that faint, questioning voice. It wasn't until I merged into the city's familiar rhythm that I noticed the ache in my shoulders, monuments to sustained anxiety. Days later, driven by a need for context, I phoned the farm's office. Explaining I was documenting my visit, I inquired about recent, similar sightings. The voice on the line confirmed it. Yes, several visitors lately had described a pale woman, a nocturnal voice. No explanation had surfaced. The occurrences seemed random, unpredictable, sometimes near the inn, sometimes on the farm grounds proper. Hanging up, I felt a strange admixture of validation and profound disquiet. My experience wasn't unique. Others had shared it, yet closure remained elusive. Her identity, her purpose, remained shrouded in the farm's troubled past, tales of hardship, offering context, but no concrete answers. Perhaps she was merely an echo, a psychic stain left by generations of stress, or perhaps, as some insisted, a phantom born of suggestion and shadowed corners. All I knew for certain was the chilling reality of my own encounter, the faint whisper that sometimes resurfaces on the edge of sleep. That was the shape of it, drawn by curiosity to a decaying farm, immersed in its narrative of sorrow relayed by watchful guides. One night in a nearby inn, shattered by a voice calling from the darkness, a glimpse of a woman in white etched in desperation against the trees before she dissolved back into the night. Confirmation the following day. I was not alone in this vision. I departed with frayed nerves and a heart that refused to settle. Even now, recalling that night sends a cold ripple down my spine. I see her still, that silhouette hovering at the tree line, eternally adrift, waiting for something or someone just beyond reach. A concussion against the timber of my refuge ripped me from sleep's undertow. My pulse hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs as lightning, stark and skeletal, flashed the cabin's interior into momentary, terrifying existence. That anyone might challenge this tempest, let alone seek entry in the thickest part of night, felt impossible. Hand trembling slightly, I drifted towards the door, oblivious that its opening would admit a darkness far deeper than the storm-lashed mountains, a trial that would fray the very fabric of reliance and survival. This eyrie, perched high and remote, was meant as sanctuary, an escape velocity achieved from the city's relentless hum. The irony wasn't lost, a bitter taste beneath the adrenaline, as another thunderclap rattled the window panes like angry fists. A week I'd been here, cradled in solitude, and this deluge was the first true spectacle of mountain fury. It clawed at the roof, a relentless assault bent on breaching my fragile peace. Again, the impact on the door, sharper now, insistent. Hello? A voice, thinned by the gale, frayed at the edges. Please, is anyone inside? I need help. Hesitation coiled in my gut. My fingers grazed the cool metal of the knob. Phantoms born of countless thrillers flickered behind my eyes. The isolated cabin, the desperate stranger, the inevitable dread. Yet, the raw plea, the vision of someone swallowed by this elemental rage. Could I condemn them? A breath, held and released. I pulled the door inward. She stood framed in the doorway, a figure sculpted by rain, shivering uncontrollably. Obsidian hair clung like seaweed to her face, her eyes vast pools reflecting terror and exhaustion. "Oh, thank heavens," she uttered, the words clicking between chattering teeth. I believed no one was here. "Inside," I urged, stepping back. "Quickly, you're soaked through." She stumbled past me, a fragile weight crossing the threshold. I slammed the door, muffling the storm's howl to a distant menace. Closer now, the faint lamplight revealed youth beneath the grime, perhaps mid-20s. Her attire was savaged, smeared with mud, and a raw, angry scratch marked one cheekbone. "Thank you," she breathed, arms wrapped tight around herself. I never imagined finding anyone this far out. Hope was dwindling. I retrieved a thick woolen blanket from the worn sofa, draping it over her shaking shoulders. "What happened? How did you come to be out in this?" Her grip tightened on the blanket, her gaze sweeping the small space, lingering on shadows as if expecting ambush. "It's involved, complicated. I scarcely know where to start." "Perhaps with a name?" I offered, striving for a calm I didn't fully possess. A pause, a flicker of uncertainty. "Lena," she supplied. "My name is Lena." "Elias," I returned. "Look, Lena, you're safe now. Sit down. I'll put some water on for tea. Then, when you're warmer, you can tell me." She nodded, a gesture of profound relief, sinking onto the sofa cushions as I moved to the compact kitchenette. While the kettle hissed towards a boil, my gaze kept finding her. She flinched with every thunderous punctuation mark from the storm. When I presented the steaming mug, her hands enveloped it as if it were a source of life itself. "Thank you," she whispered. "You can't comprehend my gratitude." I settled into the armchair opposite, allowing her space. "So, Lena, what errand brings you to the absolute middle of nowhere on a night sculpted by chaos?" She sipped the tea, a slight grimace as the heat met her lips. "I was fleeing," she admitted finally, her voice a mere thread of sound. "Fleeing what? Or whom?" I leaned forward, caught despite myself. Lena's eyes locked with mine. Within their depths lay a bedrock of fear so potent it sent an icy current through my veins. Someone who means me harm. Someone capable of terrible things. A chill distinct from the damp air settled over me. "Are you in some kind of peril?" Should we try to contact the authorities? She shook her head, a sharp, negative motion. No, please. No police. They can't help. They might even be aligned with him. Warning signals flared in my mind. This narrative was veering into treacherous territory, the kind I had sought to escape. But the storm still raged, a physical barrier to expulsion. "Who is pursuing you, Lena?" I asked, softening my tone. She placed the mug down on the rough-hewn side table, her hands visibly trembling. "My former partner. He's not the person I believed him to be. I discovered his involvement in illicit affairs, deeply illegal. When I confronted him," her voice faded, her fingers instinctively tracing the scratch on her cheek. A surge of protective anger rose in me. "He struck you?" Lena nodded, tears finally breaching the dam of her control, tracing paths through the grime on her face. "I managed to break away, but he's been relentless, hunting me. Days I've been running. I thought I'd finally given him the slip, but then, his car. I saw it on the access road below. Panic took hold. I bolted into the trees. That's when the heavens opened." My thoughts spun. If her account held true, this remote cabin was no longer a sanctuary, but a potential trap for us both. "Do you believe he knows you sought refuge here?" "I can't be certain," she said, her voice quivering. "I pray not, but he has a knack for finding me." I rose, moving towards the window, peering into the churning blackness. Rain and wind rendered the world beyond the porch an indistinct, hostile void. If someone lurked out there, detection was impossible until they were upon us. "We should be secure through the night," I said, injecting a confidence I didn't feel. "The storm's ferocity is our shield for now. Come morning, we can determine the next step." Relief washed over Lena's features, stark and immediate. "Thank you, Elias. Truly. I don't know what fate awaited me if this cabin had been empty." I offered a strained smile. "Try and get some sleep. The bedroom is yours. I'll remain out here. Keep an eye on things, just to be safe." She seemed poised to argue, but weariness etched deep lines around her eyes, silencing protest. I showed her to the small adjoining room, found her some dry clothes, and then settled onto the sofa for what promised to be an interminable watch. Sleep remained elusive, each groan of the cabin settling, every gust of wind that sounded like a footstep sent jolts through my system. Lena's narrative played on repeat in my mind, a loop searching for coherence. One part of me, the part yearning for simple decency, wanted to accept her story wholesale, to be the bulwark against her fear. Yet another more cynical voice, honed by solitary observation, whispered dissonances. As the long hours bled towards dawn and the storm's fury gradually abated, replaced by a steady soak-in rain, those whispers grew louder. Cracks appeared in her carefully constructed tail. The scratch on her cheek, it seemed too healed, too scabbed over for a fresh wound sustained in frantic flight, and her shoes, visible now by the door, were damp but remarkably free of the thick mud that should have clung from a desperate scramble through sodden woods. Around first light, a stirring from the bedroom, Lena emerged. She looked remarkably composed, her borrowed clothes neat, her hair loosely tied back, an image inconsistent with someone who'd endured days of fugitive existence. "Morning," she offered, a tentative smile gracing her lips. "Any disturbances?" I shook my head. "All quiet. The worst of it has passed. We should be able to make our way to town shortly. Find you proper assistance." A fleeting expression, was it panic, crossed her face before being smoothed away. "I'm not sure that's wise. He could be watching the roads, waiting." "Lena," I began, choosing my words with care. "I believe it's time you shared the unvarnished truth. Who are you genuinely running from?" She regarded me for a long, weighted moment. The mask didn't just slip, it dissolved. The vulnerability vanished, replaced by an unnerving coolness, a glint of calculation in her eyes. "You possess more perception than your solitude suggests," she remarked, her voice shedding its tremor, acquiring a harder edge. "Most men are too preoccupied with enacting heroism to truly observe." I stiffened, the isolation of the cabin suddenly feeling less like peace and more like vulnerability. "What is actually transpiring here, Lena?" She sighed, a gesture less of weariness than of mild impatience, running a hand through her damp hair. "The truth, I'm not fleeing anyone in the way I described. I am, however, concealing something desirable. I required a haven, a place to disappear until the pursuit cooled." My mind struggled to recalibrate. "So, your story last night, the desperate flight, the abusive ex, it was all fabricated." "Not entirely," she conceded with a dismissive shrug. "My former partner is searching for me. But believe me, Elias, he is far from the most dangerous player in this game." Just then, the distinct growl of an engine reached us, slicing through the quiet morning air, steadily drawing nearer. Lena's head snapped towards the sound, and a slow, predatory grin spread across her face. "Ah," she said, almost purring. "That would be my transport." She turned back to me. "Thank you for the shelter, Elias. You were quite literally a lifesaver." Before I could formulate a response, she moved with startling speed, pulling the door open and sprinting out onto the damp porch. A formidable black SUV had materialized at the edge of the clearing. I watched, numb and disoriented, as she wrenched open the passenger door and scrambled inside. The vehicle executed a swift, mud-spattering turn and accelerated down the track, vanishing back into the trees, leaving me utterly alone with a maelstrom of unanswered questions. Standing there on the porch, as the first rays of the morning sun finally pierced the retreating cloud cover, painting the wet world in fragile light, the reality crashed down. I understood the the precipice I had unknowingly skirted. I had opened my door to the storm, and the stranger offered unquestioning aid and had come perilously close to becoming collateral damage in a narrative far more treacherous than any tempest. What Lena was truly hiding, or the true nature of the danger she courted, remained mysteries I would likely never unravel. But that night, etched into the silence of my mountain refuge, imparted a stark lesson. Trust can be a fragile shelter easily breached. In the vast indifference of the wilderness, the most unpredictable and lethal threats often wear a human face and whisper pleas for help. The memory remains etched sharp. The inaugural night, the cadence began. 1 a.m., give or take, cocooned within my diminutive office tucked near the ground floor's rear corridor. A profound quietude reigned, the building holding its breath, save for the incessant, low thrum of the fluorescent tubes overhead. Then shattering the stillness came the footfalls from the floor directly above, not hurried nor languid, but possessed of an unnerving metronomic regularity. A tremor traced my spine. My breath hitched, shallow in my chest. I sat frozen, straining to discern fabrication from fact, yet the steps persisted, a rhythmic haunting for perhaps 30 seconds before dissolving into the quiet. A frantic check of the security monitors yielded only agitated snow, a screen full of gray chaos. That was the genesis. Silas, that's the name tethered to this nocturnal vigil. 2 years spent patrolling the hollow halls of this aging commercial edifice, a place whose arteries once pulsed with daytime bustle. Offices, small enterprises, now mostly bled dry by escalating rents the previous year. A scant few tenants cling on, their lights extinguished by 6 or 7 each evening. Come midnight, the structure stands vacant, but for myself, and occasionally the last stragglers from the shared workspace upstairs, though even they typically vanish by 10 or 11. Thereafter, solitude claims me. Loneliness rarely intrudes. Companionship isn't my currency. My shift commences at 9 post-meridian, concluding as dawn threatens at 5. The ritual is uncomplicated, a circuit of each level, confirming locked doors, ensuring no vagrant soul has sought refuge within. The usual custodianship. My command post is a small desk behind the main lobby, eyes fixed intermittently on the bank of security screens, nights previously dissolved into the blue light of phone apps or the scrolling text of online ephemera. But since the advent of the footsteps, vigilance has become my unwelcome bedfellow. The second visitation occurred around midnight. My second patrol was complete. A lukewarm coffee, procured from the lobby's humming automaton, sat cooling beside me. Minutes later, the familiar tread resonated anew, this time seemingly originating from the 3rd floor. A dampness bloomed on my forehead. Setting the cup aside, I rose, flashlight beam cutting a path before me as I ascended. Each stair riser felt weighted, pulling against my ascent. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs, breath coming quicker now. The 3rd floor corridor stretched before me, vacant and silent under the stark emergency lighting. My light probed every shadow, swept the interiors of the washrooms. Nothing. Absolute stillness. Returning to my office, I rewound the surveillance feed. Every camera on the third floor displayed that same tempest of static, precisely during the interval I'd heard the sounds. All other floors, impeccably clear. The first chilling intimation that the technology itself was compromised. In the nights that followed, the footsteps grew bolder, more frequent, always post-midnight, sometimes 12:15, sometimes closer to 1, occasionally distant, echoing from the far terminus of the uppermost corridor, other times startlingly proximate, as if the walker might materialize just beyond my office door. Each instance propelled me into investigation, a futile hunt through deserted spaces, and always the cameras offered only their digital blizzard concurrent with the sounds. I attempted rationalization, phantom electrical surges, the groans of an old structure settling its bones. Buildings exhale strange sighs in the dark, I knew, but these weren't the creaks of aged timber or the clank of plumbing. These were distinct footfalls, heel and toe, imbued with that steady, deliberate pace. A pattern began to emerge. A brief walk, a pause, another short progression, another halt, a patrol mirroring my own. Sleep became elusive. Daylight hours found me supine, replaying the echoing steps in the theater of my mind, visualizing those stark, empty corridors. My supervisor dismissed my concerns. Fatigue, he suggested, the product of too many solitary hours. I ceased mentioning it, resolving to unearth the truth independently. One night, driven by a need for validation, I positioned my phone on the third floor, set it to record audio and video, a silent witness. Near the corridor's midpoint, I activated it and retreated downstairs. The weight was taut. Around 1, the phantom returned, its tread directly overhead. I let the sounds fade completely before ascending to retrieve my device. Playback revealed 30 seconds of normalcy, then impenetrable blackness on screen, the audio devolving into a piercing, high-frequency whine, precisely as the footsteps should have begun. A knot tightened in my gut. The phone, fully charged with ample memory, had functioned perfectly moments before. Yet the crucial segment was corrupted, obliterated. A few nights later, resolve hardened within me. I would confront this presence. Near midnight, I began my rounds, deviating from habit, pausing in shadowed alcoves, listening intently, hoping to intercept the phenomenon while already present on its chosen stage. Silence answered my vigil initially. Reaching the second floor, I stood sentinel near the elevator bank. Then, above, on the third, the steps commenced. I took the stairs, 2 at a time, bursting onto the third floor landing. The footfalls ceased abruptly. My muscles locked. The flashlight beam trembled, betraying the tremor in my hands. Another sweep confirmed the emptiness. Nausea washed over me, my legs suddenly weak. Forcing slow, deliberate breaths, I steadied myself and walked to the corridor's end, pressing a hand against the cold window pane. Below, the street slept under the intermittent flicker of a lone lamppost. Occasional headlights sliced the darkness, offering no solace. Turning, I surveyed the silent expanse behind me, utterly still. Descending the stairs, a thought coalesced, chilling in its implication. The pattern. It seemed to map my own patrol routes. First floor, second, third, sometimes top down, sometimes bottom up, mirroring my own variations. The entity wasn't just walking, it was retracing my movements, offset by minutes, perhaps hours. It was copying me. My heart rate surged at the connection, a heavy weight settling in my chest. Reason offered no purchase here. The phantom's territory expanded. Initially confined to the upper reaches, the steps descended, first to the second floor, directly above my office, then inevitably to the ground floor corridor leading to my very door. Panic began to fray the edges of my composure. Each time the sounds approached, I'd sit rigid, gaze fixed on the doorknob, anticipating its turn. It never happened. The steps would halt just outside, a silent sentinel, before eventually receding. One evening, I decided to document the monitor failure itself, aiming my phone at the screen displaying the hallway outside my office. Around 1:45, the ground floor footfalls began. My phone recorded the clear image flicker, then dissolve into gray noise as the steps grew louder, closer. Then, silence. The static cleared scant seconds later, revealing the empty corridor once more. The phone's video captured the transition, the audio preserving the footsteps, albeit warped, glitch-ridden. Another piece of useless proof. Weeks bled into a month. The prospect of work became a source of profound dread. My supervisor observed my frayed nerves, but I mumbled excuses about stress. He offered a day shift, a lifeline I couldn't afford to grasp due to the pay cut. So, the nights remained mine, haunted. I introduced a radio into my office, a bulwark of background noise. It offered thin comfort. The distinctive clarity of the footsteps sliced through the music whenever they began. An experiment formed one night, earlier than usual, around 10:30. I yearned to complete my round swiftly, to barricade myself in the office until dawn, moving through the levels, first, second, third, checking locks, peering into vacant rooms, while securing a second-floor supply closet. The hypothesis struck with force. The steps always replicated the previous night's route. To test it, I deliberately scrambled my path, 4th floor first, down to the first, up to the third, then the second, a chaotic deviation from routine. The following night confirmed it. The phantom patrol began on the 4th floor, descended to the first, ascended to the third, concluded on the second. My exact, erratic path from 24 hours prior. The realization landed like a physical blow. Whatever this was, it was learning, mimicking, shadowing my existence across time. Armed with this disturbing knowledge, my patrols became strategic exercises. I left subtle markers. A waste bin shifted inches from a wall, a sliver of tape affixed to the floor. Occasionally, these markers would be reset to their original positions by morning, though no camera ever captured the act, succumbing predictably to static during the crucial intervals. On a night thick with tension, around 1 a.m., the steps descended from the 3rd floor, traversed the 2nd overhead, then echoed on the stairwell leading down to my level. I stood beside my office door, flashlight extinguished, breath held captive in my lungs. My pulse throbbed in my temples. The footfalls reached the hallway's end, paused. Silence stretched taut. Then they resumed, heading back towards the stairs. Relief warred with an insidious dread. Keys trembling in my hand, I locked my office and followed, maintaining a fearful distance. My own shoes scuffed loudly on the tile, clumsy counterpoints to the unseen walker. The steps ascended to the second floor. I trailed them up the stairs. Upon reaching the landing, they stopped cold. The corridor yawned empty. A minute passed in heavy breaths. A slow, meticulous check of each office revealed nothing disturbed, yet the sensation of being observed prickled my skin, raising the hairs on my arms. Defeated, I retreated to my office chair, staring at the clear, uninformative monitors. The remainder of the night passed in unnerving silence. Why? The question circled endlessly. The only conclusion that felt remotely plausible was the presence of something mirroring my actions, my very passage through the building. The how and the why remained terrifyingly opaque. Functionality frayed. By the next week, I was operating on raw nerves. I investigated wiring, ventilation shafts, warped floorboards. Nothing yielded a rational source. Inquiries with the few remaining tenants yielded shrugs. Some admitted to hearing nocturnal noises, but attributed them to my rounds. Their indifference amplified my isolation. The breaking point arrived during a midnight patrol of the second floor. Listening, waiting. Then, the steps erupted below, on the first floor, but altered, faster than usual, urgent, ascending the stairs towards me. I froze mid-corridor, flashlight gripped so tightly my knuckles ached white. They reached the second floor landing, paused. I backed away instinctively, breath shuddering. Then they advanced, step by measured step, directly towards me, mimicking the exact gait I employed on these rounds. My chest constricted, my own heartbeat roared in my ears. I turned and fled, scrambling down the nearest stairwell, back to the perceived safety of my office. The door locked. I spun towards the monitor. The corridor camera dissolved into static. When clarity returned, the hallway was empty, but the footsteps sounded immediately outside my door, impossibly close. My hands shook violently, fumbling the flashlight. It clattered to the floor. As I retrieved it, its beam cutting the dimness, the footsteps receded, simply walked away. Now, each night unfolds the same. I wait for the cadence to begin. I track its progress, log the times, watch the monitors surrender to chaos. Action feels futile. No entity is ever visible, yet the phantom diligently retraces my path from the night before. It draws nearer, its nature and purpose shrouded in an impenetrable mystery I cannot unravel. I endure because the paycheck demands it, but the certainty persists. Something walks with me in this hollow building, an echo given form, step by painstaking step. And with every passing night, with every footfall that mirrors my own in the desolate corridors, logic frays a little further, leaving only the listening, the recording, and the constant battle against the rising tide of panic. The first time the currency slid from one palm to another, a furtive whisper of paper in the echoing vastness, I felt the ground beneath me shift, become unstable. It wasn't a king's ransom, merely a swollen envelope exchanged between tailored suits amidst the grime. Yet standing there, swallowed by the cavernous dust-choked depot repurposed for relief, a chilling clarity pierced the altruistic haze. This deluge, this ruin, wasn't solely a tragedy to be mended. For some, it was a fertile ground for avarice. I'd offered my hands, my time, after the waters surged, reclaiming our city block, by drowning block, a cataclysm unseen for generations. It had orphaned thousands from their homes, leaving behind a landscape of sodden despair. My motive was simple, pure even, to contribute, to alleviate, to matter. Little could I fathom, I was stepping onto the silken threads of a tapestry of deceit, one woven tightly enough to strangle. Those initial days bled into a frantic rhythm of labor, unending hours spent parceling out sustenance, blankets, solace, guiding the displaced towards fragile shelters, immersing myself in the tide of human need. The exhaustion was profound, settling deep in bone and muscle, yet countered by a potent sense of purpose, a tangible impact. Then, perhaps a week into the fray, discordant notes began to surface in the symphony of rescue. Consignments logged as delivered, yet phantomly present in the warehouse inventory. Donations arriving, substantial ones, yet vanishing before notation. And perpetually, the polished shoes and hushed conferences of men who seemed utterly alien to the surrounding devastation. Initially, denial was my shield. Imagination, I chided myself, running wild in the operational chaos. Surely, in such bedlam, oversights were inevitable, administrative cracks unavoidable, but persistent tremor of wrongness resonated deep within. It culminated one evening when I lingered late, organizing a fresh arrival of medical essentials. Silence reigned, or so I believed. Then voices, sharp, serrated whispers, leaked from the cramped office tucked away at the rear. They escalated, gaining a venomous edge. Compelled by a curiosity I'd later curse, I moved, a shadow navigating stacks of donated hope, until a sliver of light from the ill-fitting door offered a view. Inside stood two figures, Marcus Thorne, the coordinator steering our entire relief apparatus, and beside him, a man whose face I knew from city broadcasts, Councilman Davies. "This paltry sum," Davies hissed, brandishing an envelope identical to the one I'd first seen. "Have you any concept of the influence I wielded, the channels I bent, merely to redirect those pharmaceuticals here?" Thorne's countenance was suffused with a choleric red. "It's the maximum feasible extraction for now. The remainder follows the liquidation of the subsequent shipment." Liquid ice flooded my veins. Liquidation. These were gifts, meant for the shivering, the sick, the dispossessed. Selling them. A gasp, perhaps, or the scuff of my shoe. Some betraying sound escaped me. Instantly, both pairs of eyes snapped towards the door. I recoiled, heart hammering a frantic tattoo against my ribs, convinced its frantic rhythm was audible. "Verify the perimeter," Thorne commanded, his voice low and dangerous. "Confirm our solitude." I didn't linger for discovery. Swiftly, silently, I retraced my steps through the labyrinth of boxes to my workstation. Snatching my satchel, I steered myself towards the exit, forcing a nonchalance utterly betrayed by the panic constricting my throat. That night, sleep was a forgotten country. My mind became a frantic projector, replaying the overheard exchange, the implications blossoming into monstrous shapes. This wasn't mere pilfering, not minor graft. It was calculated, systemic plunder on an audacious scale, and men capable of stripping resources from catastrophe's victims. What boundaries wouldn't they transgress? Returning the following day demanded a new resolve. to amass proof. Walking away felt like complicity, an abandonment of the very people I'd pledged to aid, while Thorne and his ilk gorged themselves. My focus sharpened. I became an observer, cataloging inconsistencies, etching discrepancies into memory, even capturing furtive images with my phone's lens. For a week, I inhabited the role of the earnest volunteer, a mask concealing the clandestine archivist beneath. Prudence was my watchword, or so I naively assumed. But in an ecosystem thriving on secrets and high stakes, vigilance is rarely unilateral. It was Lena who voiced the first tremor of warning. Another volunteer, young, her idealism mirroring my own recent past. We'd forged a connection amidst the shared toil. She intercepted me as our shift concluded, her gaze flicking nervously around the emptying space. "Exercise caution," she breathed, urgency tightening her whisper. "They're making inquiries about you. I believe suspicions have been aroused." I attempted a facade of dismissal, offering hollow reassurances, but inwardly, fear coiled icy tendrils around my gut. That evening, the decision crystallized. It was time to approach the authorities. My collection of evidence, though fragmented, surely warranted scrutiny. That opportunity never materialized. The subsequent dawn revealed the warehouse besieged not by volunteers, but by uniformed police. A fleeting surge of hope coursed through me. Had another soul stepped forward? Was the corrupted operation finally being dismantled? Then I saw him, Marcus Thorne, conversing earnestly with the officers, his finger subtly indicating my direction. Two policemen detached themselves, their expressions unreadable, implacable. "Ma'am," one stated, his tone level, "we require you to accompany us. There are inquiries regarding certain missing assets." The world tilted. They were inverting the truth, expertly crafting a narrative with me as the villain. How had they orchestrated this reversal with such swift, brutal efficiency? 12 hours dissolved within the sterile confines of an interrogation room, a relentless cycle of repeated questions. They presented fabricated logs bearing my forged signature, security footage cunningly edited to depict me loading cartons into my vehicle. It was a constellation of falsehoods, yet alarmingly persuasive. Had I not been the protagonist of this harrowing reality, perhaps even I would have been swayed. Release came eventually, not as exoneration, but as a chillingly clear ultimatum: retreat or face utter ruin. They possessed the leverage to obliterate my existence. That night, back in the refuge of my apartment, defeat was a palpable presence, fear a constant, unseen companion. Every creak of the floorboards, every siren in the distance, amplified the terror. What chance did I possess against an entity wielding such pervasive influence? Yet, as I sat cocooned in darkness, a different heat began to displace the cold dread. Indignation, fierce and righteous. How dare they? How dare they pilfer from those already stripped bare by fate? How dare they twist my attempt at integrity into a crime? The realization dawned. Solitude was weakness, but perhaps I wasn't truly alone. Thoughts turned to Lena, to other faces in the warehouse, whose eyes held fleeting shadows of doubt, and always to the flood victims, the silent sufferers of this hidden betrayal. Cautiously, I began extending feelers, a hushed exchange during a shared task, a carefully phrased question probing unspoken anxieties. Gradually, Resonance emerged. Others had witnessed anomalies, harbored suspicions, yet remained paralyzed by fear. A fragile coalition formed, bound by shared unease and a burgeoning resolve. Together, we commenced weaving our own counter-narrative, piece by painstaking piece. The path was fraught with peril. Near misses became commonplace. The certainty of discovery a constant shadow. Returning home one evening to find my apartment violently searched sent a fresh wave of terror through me. On another occasion, a nondescript sedan became my unnerving escort for hours across the city grid. Fear became a permanent knot low in my stomach, never fully loosening its grip. Yet, we endured. We corroborated accounts, amassed documentation, fortified our network of witnesses. Finally, after weeks suspended between hope and dread, we presented our meticulously compiled case to the state investigators. The ensuing investigation unfolded like a vast, intricate machine, pulling me into its gears. Suddenly, I was conferring with federal agents, delivering sworn depositions, assisting in the meticulous unraveling of a corrupt network that stretched far beyond our modest relief center. The flood, it transpired, was merely the visible symptom of a deeply rooted disease. Thorne and his confederates had been siphoning disaster funds for years, a nationwide enterprise with tendrils reaching into political offices, securing judicial complicity. The scale dwarfed my initial comprehension. The day the arrests commenced was a maelstrom of triumph and terror. From the anonymity of a secure location, I watched news reports broadcast images of Thorne and the others, faces grim, being escorted in restraints. Yet, an unsettling awareness lingered. Individuals of their ilk possessed tenacious memories and extensive influence. Entry into witness protection followed swiftly. A new identity, a different city, a life irrevocably altered. Occasionally, nostalgia aches for the existence relinquished, the connection severed. But then, the faces of those we ultimately aided surface in my mind, the tangible good salvaged from the wreckage of deceit. The truth, exposed, had mattered. 5 years have now elapsed. The impulse to serve persists. I find myself drawn to soup kitchens, shelters for the unhoused. It seems embedded in my very fabric, but caution is now my constant companion, an awareness of the potential darkness that can fester even within endeavors cloaked in nobility. Sometimes witnessing news of another natural disaster unfurl across a screen, I ponder, are others elsewhere engaged in this same clandestine battle, risking everything to illuminate hidden truths? I fervently hope so, for if my ordeal imparted one indelible lesson, it is that corruption festers most virulently in obscurity. It demands courageous souls willing to cast light, irrespective of the personal cost, to banish it. So, if you find yourself bearing witness, if you perceive the rot beneath the surface, do not succumb to silence. Raise your voice. Resist. The path will not be facile. It may demand more than you believe you possess, but it holds intrinsic worth. Because truth, ultimately, possesses an unyielding gravity. And perhaps, just perhaps, through the cumulative efforts of individuals like us, someday few shadows will remain for the corrupt to exploit.